I'm a brilliant intellectual.
As am I.
The two of us were sick and tired of dealing with troglodytes, and so we moved into a bomb shelter so we wouldn't catch the stupid.
To stay sharp, we spent our days pursuing the pastime of true intellectuals, debunking YouTube videos. But when the world needed us most, we disappeared.
Without uploading for over a year.
We had caught the stupid.
The pandemic resulted in the unwashed masses trespassing into our shelter and destroying our brains with how stupid they are.
Our brilliant IQs went from above average
to below.
The doctor said we had no chance of recovery, and that we should probably just kill ourselves.
Instead, we went through intense rehabilitation. Regained our cognitive function.
And then some.
And we're returning to do what we were always meant to do.
Debunk YouTube videos!
This might be the most important chart for understanding American politics.
I'm skeptical.
It shows the ideology of both parties in Congress over the past few decades. Researchers looked at every politician's voting record and then gave them a score based on how extreme or moderate they were. And if you look at the past 40 years, something dramatic has happened. Both parties have moved away from the center, but Republicans in Congress have moved much further than Democrats have.
And we all know that the center is a perfect and objective metric for this because that hasn't changed at all since the 1960s.
Indeed. Well, centrists don't exactly publish a platform every year. Can you tell me with a straight face that a moderate in the 1960s would believe in gay marriage or abortion on demand or transgenderism? It's true that on a number of economic issues, the Republican Party has either stood its ground or moved further to the right since the 1960s. However, socially, this is absolutely not the case. And even issues where the Republican Party seemed to be more left-wing in the 1960s need to be analyzed contextually. For example, the Republican Party platform of 1960 called for a doubling of the number of immigrants entering the country. Sounds pretty left-wing, right? Well, not exactly, because at this time the immigration quotas were limited to 270,000 per year. Today, at least 1 million immigrants enter the US yearly. And due to illegal immigration, the actual number becomes extremely difficult to define. So Republicans wanting to limit immigration today doesn't mean they've moved farther to the right. It means our immigration policy has moved to the left.
And the left has moved to the left as well, according to this Pew Research analysis.
When lefties claim politics has gotten more conservative, it's kind of like this.
Hey! What are you guys doing? Why are you moving away from me? Stop moving downward! Why is the planet leaving me? Don't leave me! You're shrinking! Why are you shrinking?
That difference is even more jarring if you look at the past few presidents. Republican presidents have become more and more conservative over the past few decades, while Democrats have stayed fairly consistent.
Did anyone else notice that this chart places Harry Truman and Obama at the same position on the political spectrum?
Well, he did bomb countless civilians and get us involved in meaningless wars, so they aren't all that different. He called for universal health care, tried nationalizing the steel industry, and promoted other socialist policies. But he also shut down a railroad strike by threatening to draft everyone on strike into the military. He stated that illegal immigration was occurring at a, quote, alarming rate, and that, quote, everyone suffers from the presence of illegal immigrants, unquote, while trying to pass legislation that would punish employers who hired them. And while he never commented on the issue, can you tell me with a straight face that he supported gay marriage? What about transgenderism? What about men competing in women's sports or abortion on demand without stigma up until the 9th month? Would he have voted against the Born Alive Act like Obama did? Truman was on the economic left, to be sure. But socially, our politics have swung so far left so quickly that it's laughable to suggest that a person from the 1940s could be anything but far right by Vox's standards.
Political scientists have a name for this. They call it
complete nonsense?
Asymmetrical polarization.
Oh.
It's one of the most important trends in recent American politics, but it's also one of the hardest to talk about. And that's posing a big challenge for journalists who want to stay neutral while covering a party that's increasingly going off the rails.
If Republicans have gone off the rails, what about the side of the aisle that spent months openly encouraging rioters?
This is not the Republican Party that any of us recognize.
This is not the Republican Party I joined 40 years ago.
What happened to the Republican Party?
Oh, I've been asking myself that question. It's soul-crushing for me.
Let's just address the soy boy in the room. I am not a great person to be making this argument.
Maza self-deprecating? Credit where it's due.
As long as he's okay with us doing the same. Maza is a soy boy!
I'm a queer, tree-hugging atheist with immigrant parents. Me criticizing Republicans is about as shocking as Vox having marimbas in the background of a video. So, I brought some backup.
I'm Norm Ornstein. I'm a political scientist. I've been think tanking it for longer than most of the people watching this have been alive.
Norm Ornstein is kind of a legend. He spent the past 4 decades writing about Congress and American politics. He's been named one of the top 100 global thinkers. I used to win debate competitions in high school using articles that Ornstein wrote.
And we win debates by talking at our computer screen when you can't respond.
We can self-deprecate too.
Just to be clear, this guy's credentials are that he helped you win debates and got some shoutouts. None of those things are evidence that he's a centrist. Yet you're presenting him to sound pretty moderate by listing your biases and suggesting he does not suffer from the same prejudices. But nothing is said about his views, past or present, to suggest that he's at all moderate. And here's the kicker. Even if he was moderate, the center has moved to the left over the past several decades. The point you seem to be missing oh, look at that, the guy's a Democrat.
How objective.
Most of Ornstein's work has focused on how to make sure that Congress stays functional.
Oh, wow, well, he's doing a great job.
I work very closely with a lot of Democrats and with a lot of Republicans.
And then, in 2012, Ornstein and his writing partner Thomas Mann write this book. It's even worse than it looks: how the American constitutional system collided with the new politics of extremism. In it, they write, the Republican Party is an insurgent outlier. It has become ideologically extreme, scornful of compromise, and dismissive of the legitimacy of its political opposition.
Yep, that's why the Republicans spent 3 years claiming a democratically elected president was only in his position due to Russian meddling despite having no evidence, constantly dismiss their opponents as conspiracy theorists, and do everything they can to deplatform their opposition. Oh, wait.
There's no question that the Republican Party's goals have become more extreme over the past few years. In 2006, George Bush was talking about immigration like this.
There is a rational middle ground between granting an automatic path to citizenship and a program of mass deportation.
Compare that to Donald Trump.
You're going to have a deportation force.
How are those two statements incompatible? Bush never said there would be no deportations. ICE was created under his administration.
In 1970, a Republican president created the Environmental Protection Agency to regulate pollution.
These problems will not stand still for politics or for partisanship.
Now, Republicans campaign on abolishing that same agency.
We are going to end the EPA intrusion into your lives.
Now do the same thing, but with their positions on same-sex unions.
Yes, I appreciate that he's discussing policy and not just position relative to an ever-shifting center now, but this is definitely cherry-picked.
Even the Republican obsession with tax cuts is a relatively new phenomenon. Reagan is worshipped as a tax hawk now, but he actually raised taxes 11 times during his presidency.
If only this claim could be refuted by the primary pejorative for tax cuts being named after Ronald Reagan.
Yes. What's that word they use every time we cut taxes? Something-nomics?
Under Ronnie, the individual tax rate went from 70% to 28%.
Reagan did allow for tax increases later on, but reluctantly, and not as a matter of ideology. Overall, his administration reduced net taxes.
Yes, I'm not his biggest fan, but the insinuation that he was pro-tax increase and that a desire for tax cuts creeped into the Republican Party sometime after him is absolute, unadulterated garbage.
Do you think the millionaire ought to pay more in taxes than the bus driver, or less?
Reagan and Trump both cut taxes for the rich and the bus driver.
On its own, that ideological shift isn't a huge problem, as long as the two parties still work together.
Why? If one party is moving towards evil Nazi extremist fascist bad boy opinions, why is it important to work with them?
Oh, by work together he means do what we tell you.
Over the past few decades, Republicans have gotten less and less willing to work with Democrats on anything.
Because Democrats have moved farther and farther to the left.
This chart shows how often the filibuster was used to block a vote in the Senate. When Republicans aren't in power, they're more willing to stop Democrats from getting anything done.
Yeah, that's literally the reason we voted for him.
And you can really see it escalate after Obama wins the presidency in 2008. That year, Democrats won both houses of Congress. And in a normal world, Republicans would have taken the L, reworked their campaign strategy, and focused on the next election.
Normal. That would be a normal thing, to do whatever the opposing party wants and not resist them because they won the last election.
Instead, Mitch McConnell came out and said this.
Our top political priority over the next 2 years should be to deny President Obama a second term.
Whoa, that's crazy. When has the other side ever done that? Never, I bet.
But we cannot accept a second term for Donald Trump.
In 2013, they actually shut the government down.
The real tragedy was that they opened it back up again.
In 2016, Republicans rejected Obama's budget before they even saw what was in it.
They really should have given it a chance. I'm sure it was full of tax cuts and spending cuts and all sorts of things they wanted.
And then, of course, there's Merrick Garland.
All around me are familiar faces.
Republicans flat out refused to meet with Obama's Supreme Court nominee for months. Not because he was too liberal, Garland was objectively a centrist.
Moderate is too liberal for me! Also, the claim that he's moderate itself is a bit misleading. He's not exactly outspoken on his positions, so we don't really know his overall leanings, but he outed himself as biased when he refused to answer whether or not he would prosecute illegal immigration-related crimes. The Constitution clearly allows for this, so any judge should have no problem saying yes. What would stop him if not for a left-wing bias?
But because they wanted a Republican to fill the seat.
Oh, wow, they resisted the president appointing a Supreme Court justice? Oh my goodness, the horror! I've never heard of somebody doing something like that. Did they accuse him of rape, or say he was a racist for adopting a black child, or say he shouldn't serve because of his religion, or accuse him of sexual harassment with no evidence or something like that? That's so messed up!
We don't intend to take up a nominee.
You ever watch someone's soul wither away mid-sentence? The thing is, if Hillary had won the election, many Republicans said they would have kept the seat open permanently, preferring to have an incomplete Supreme Court than let a Democrat appoint a justice.
That is not normal behavior by party leaders.
Yeah! You're supposed to harass your opponent for weeks with attempted character assassinations and false accusations.
This my way or the highway approach is bad for democracy. And Ornstein's book was his attempt to get neutral observers, including journalists.
Neutral observers! Including journalists!
Oh my goodness.
And it really is a party that I would say has gone rogue. And I don't say that as a partisan.
You are a partisan. You just don't say it as one.
The problem is, admitting that fact makes you sound like a liberal hack.
Sound like one, huh?
And if you look at the comments on this video, you know exactly what I mean.
Wait till he notices us.
I hope he doesn't. I like being monetized.
Talking about asymmetric polarization, by definition, means you treat the two parties differently.
Talking about it competently means taking social issues into account and recognizing that both parties have been moving farther to the left over the past several decades.
And that means being accused of liberal bias.
This is tough for media to do.
That's why they never do it.
This is not the Republican Party that any of us recognize.
This is not the Republican Party I joined 40 years ago.
What happened to the Republican Party?
Oh, I've been asking myself that question. It's soul-crushing for me.
Many networks have framed political fights as just bitter disputes between two parties that can't get along.
A stalemate now exists as both sides dig in their heels.
Yes, we're failing to compromise because both sides are digging their heels in. We just need one of those sides to stop.
Both sides blaming one another for this impasse.
Both sides playing politics.
You saw it during the 2013 government shutdown. Republicans literally held the government hostage to undermine Obamacare. But instead of pointing that out, a lot of coverage blamed both sides for not compromising.
With both sides digging in, we are now in uncharted territory.
Both sides refuse to budge.
Washington is a dysfunctional town, and there's plenty of blame to go around on both sides.
Both sides? How dare he?
You're only allowed to insult the other side. Other side bad, my side good!
Obama went out of his way to avoid that framing.
What a shock!
I want every American to understand why it did happen. They demanded ransom just for doing their job.
But the media's affinity for that both sides frame meant that even those comments got criticized.
President Obama playing the blame game.
Playing the blame game. The blame game continues.
This kind of knee-jerk neutrality
Yes, knee-jerk neutrality. That's what our media's guilty of.
It makes it really hard to understand who's responsible for breaking our politics.
If you are monomaniacal in pursuit of both sides, you ignore a reality where there may be one side.
And the scary thing about asymmetrical polarization is that it forces the other party to play hardball too. When Republicans refused to vote on a huge number of Obama's judicial appointees, Democrats changed the rules.
Democrats voted to lower the threshold to break a filibuster from 60 votes to 51 votes.
It's time to change the Senate before this institution becomes obsolete.
Wait, the little sweethearts who always want to compromise did what?
It was a bad but necessary response to an unusual situation.
But the Republicans failing to compromise is not a necessary response to the political center moving to the left. Got it.
One created by Republicans. But that decision to change the rules has haunted Democrats for years. As tensions flared over Brett Kavanaugh's nomination to the Supreme Court, MSNBC's Casey Hunt blamed Democrats for starting the problem.
Yeah, it was the Republicans who started the whole accuse everyone of rape thing.
You know, there's a lot of people you could blame for that. Started with the Democrats and Harry Reid when he took away the filibuster for those circuit court judges, and it got lower when Mitch McConnell did it for the Supreme Court.
Oh wow, look at that, someone just said a fact!
This problem is likely to get worse as time goes on.
Because the left is likely to continue to move farther to the left.
The more Republicans move to the extreme, the more Democrats are going to seem obstructionists in response.
Oh, okay, they aren't obstructionists, they just seem obstructionist.
So look at this filibuster graph again. Every time Republicans raise the stakes, Democrats react by matching them.
Oh hey, look at my chart of politicians accusing Supreme Court nominees of being serial rapists. Looks like you guys are the only guys doing that. Wow, weird. Seems kind of obstructionist. Seems.
Guess what the Democrats are doing? Punching back, tit for tat.
Neither side here has clean hands.
There seem to be no grown-ups in charge.
And what that does is it means that people who behave badly get off the hook.
Stop blaming us for behaving badly. That lets people who behave badly off the hook.
Nobody blames them for it, and it's easy for them to say, hey, the other side is worse.
The only way to discourage this kind of norm-breaking behavior is to be really clear about who's causing it.
But only people on the other side, because if you call out Democrats, that's false neutrality.
That's gonna make it really tempting to say both sides are equally bad.
So tempting, I might just do it.
No, don't!
Both!
Don't do it!
Sides!
No!
So! Merrick Garland? You were a centrist.
Hey folks, thank you so much for watching. This is our first new episode of the Debunkers in over a year. So if you enjoyed it, please like, share, subscribe, give feedback, leave your comments below so I know whether or not to keep making more of these. If you want to help support the show, please donate at patreon.com/FreedomToons. Thank you so much.